You're listening to Big World Network.
The Five Kingdoms of Severi, Book 1, The Keys of Destiny, Episode 1, written and read by Dora Gonzalez. Kel stared at the sketches he had drawn of a wooden horse that were sprawled all over the table, half hidden under pieces of oak and carving tools. He smoothed out the new crinkles forming in the corners of the parchments and set down the pages of the parts of the horse he had already started to carve. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he made another correction on the design, taking care not to smudge it with his hand in his haste. Running a rough hand through his brown hair, ruffling it further, he looked at the setting sun showing through the open window. Deep thoughts reflected in his hazel eyes, young eyes warmed by untold knowledge. He abandoned his stool and moved to light another candle. The lit candle resting in one of the corners of the single room could no longer provide enough light as the night went about its daily regimen. Shadows danced in the newly lit corner and caused the particular item to shine even brighter. A sword resting in his sheath hung near the door, and he moved towards it, forgotten memories of battles and dangerous adventures filling his mind. Kel gripped the hilt tightly with one hand, his other hand moving to the sheath, the urge to unsheath it one more time surging through his body. He could feel the faded trace of the oracle's magic welded into the metal. The squeal of a baby from behind him brought his attention back to the area where his work table stood, and he turned around, a gentle smile on his face. His wife Sindel had fallen asleep in the rocking chair he had built for her last winter, their baby boy still carefully tucked in the carrying pouch strapped to her breast. Kel shoved the sword into a chest near the door and moved towards his son, his hand automatically reaching for the top part of the horse he had been carving. "That's right, it's for you. Do you like it?" He held the half-finished horse up for the baby to see, small blue eyes lighting up as the baby squealed again, kicking his tiny feet against the sturdy fabric holding him in place. Kel chuckled softly and caught himself before the curiosity of his son had him laughing loud enough to fill their home. He did not want to wake his wife, and yet found his excitement hard to mask. "I see your mother forgot you were tied to her again," he whispered to his son, the baby's eyes never leaving his father's hand that contained the horse. "Let me get you out of there." A knock made Kel pause, and his gaze moved to the door again. Another knock, more persistent and louder, filled the quiet cabin, bringing the small moment of glee to an end. Before Kel could reach the door, strips of golden light danced around the latch. The latch released, and it swung open. A small creak of the hinges, and a half-cloaked figure stood in the doorway, face shadowed by the brown hood in the ever-growing night. "Hello, Kel," a young woman's voice greeted, giving away who the visitor was, though the magic used to unlock his door had left him with only 6 other possibilities. The woman removed to shake her crimson hair loose. It fell with ease upon her slender shoulders in layers of smooth waves. "Are you not going to greet your queen?" Her green eyes lit in amusement as she scanned the room, taking in every detail, before skimming over him and stopping at the rocking chair. "I wasn't expecting any company tonight," Kel replied, still standing in the middle of the single room, "and I surely wasn't expecting you, Torin." The woman stepped further inside, shutting the door behind her before turning back around to face Kel. "Now there is something I never expected the man I have come to trust with my life to say," Torin stated, searching under her cloak for the items she had come to deliver. "You used to welcome my presence. In fact, you used to seek it out, if I recall correctly. It really has been so long. You should stop by the castle sometime." "Why are you here, Torin? Is it customary for the queen to make personal visits at this hour?" Kel replied, putting an end to any further invitations. He had to fight back the urge to usher her out and slam the door in her royal face. "Kel, you know why I'm here." Her soft, calm features gave way to reflect a hint of sadness and longing, setting the uneasy feeling in Kel's stomach to an unbearable level. "And I am not here as the queen, but as an oracle." "Don't," Kel cut her off, his voice almost unrecognizable to his own ears. "Don't dare think you can come to my home and claim to have some silly prophecy about my son and expect me to accept it. You might have been able to fool me once with all that duty and destiny talk, but not any more. Royals cause nothing but death and pain." He took a step towards her, his last word almost falling from his shaken lips in a deadly whisper. Torin refused to budge, her face only filling with even greater sadness as her hand pressed gently against her chest in a gesture that had become routine for her. He almost regretted the words he had spoken, the heavy hatred behind them tasting vile on his tongue. His rage and fear faded, his reasoning weakened, and his eyes fell on the small metal pendant hidden under her garments. the last item Kel's dead father had forged. "Are you sure?" he asked as he realized that moving to the far edge of the kingdom had served no real purpose. Kel had tried to escape his destiny only to have his sons merge with it. He had failed to spare his wife the fate he had fought so hard to outrun. "My readings are always accurate," Terdune stated, her chin rising slightly upwards in a mixture of pride and stubbornness. "He has the gift and power of the royal protectors, just like you." Kel set the wooden construction down, finally remembering he still clung to it, and made his way to the door. "Let's take this outside." He set a firm hand on Terdun's shoulder and turned her around with every intention to do as he had said. Terdune hesitated. She moved away from him and towards his son still strapped to his sleeping wife. Kel pushed the dry knot at the back of his throat down and made no attempt to get between her and his son. He stood by the door and tried to remember how to breathe. Terdune grazed her fingers over the little boy's forehead, tracing a symbol on his pale skin. The baby reached for her hand and giggled with greater delight when his small fingers circled around them. Terdune smiled down at the baby and gently patted the top of his head, caressing his soft raven hair, the same color as his mother's. Her smile vanished, engulfed in another saddened expression, and she turned, following Kel outside to take part in a conversation that was long overdue. Kel softly closed the door behind him, letting his hands linger on the wooden construction that had become his home, and then turned towards Terdune. "There are many more children we could have." His eyes refused to set on her, and instead rested on the single tree behind her that still had its leaves, as he fought to maintain his wavering emotion. The reins of her white horse were tied to one of its larger branches, and he couldn't help thinking how well it looked after all these years. "You will only have him, and he is one of the 2 keys. Do not fight it, Kel." Terdune handed him a small black pouch. "He will need this when he reaches the age of 18. Keep it safe until then." She pressed the pouch into his hand when he refused to take it and walked away, placing her hood back on her head. "Remember, he must not wield them until his 18th birthday," Terdune called over her shoulder as she undid the reins and mounted her horse. Kel entered his home with louder steps and his shoulders heavier than before. He paused with his hand still on the handle, the sounds of retrieving hooves echoing through the door, and looked up at his wife. She no longer sat on the rocking chair asleep. Her eyes were alert and silent as they read his posture and face. Catching the strained jaw and needing no further explanation, they shared an understanding look and said nothing as the glowing symbol on their baby's forehead finally vanished, leaving behind no trace of ever having been there. Kel sat back on his stool and set the pouch down, wishing he had decided to settle on the other side of the borders. He glanced at the pouch and finally opened it, spilling the contents on the top of the table. A small dagger with a red ruby embedded in its golden hilt, and a clear crystal attached to a leather-strapped necklace. His wife stood and rested a hand on his shoulder before handing him the wooden horse, the silence finally breaking with her son's cheerful giggles.
Music by Kevin MacLeod.
You're listening to Big World Network.